For the word of the week this week, we're looking at worship, and worship is being used with two different Greek words in one verse in Matthew chapter 4. So in Matthew chapter 4, we get the temptation of Jesus by Satan in the wilderness. And we're told that Jesus fasts alone in the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights. He's very hungry and he's vulnerable, and that's when the tempter shows up and tempts him to renounce his identity and his mission and to yield himself to Satan to get his hunger and other wants and needs dealt with. Today we're only going to look at the third temptation, and that's in Matthew chapter 4, verses 8 and 9, and I'm reading from the ESV. Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. And he said to him, "All these I will give you if you will fall down and worship me." Let's take a look at that last part, if you will fall down and worship me, in Koine. Aeon peson proskuneses moi. So when we see that aeon in the subjunctive mood, we're getting a third-class condition, the introduction of a "if you do this, I'll do that." All right, so what's the condition? I will give you all these things if you will fall down and worship me. So that's the third-class condition that we see. But I want you to take a careful look at how this is phrased. So aeon proskuneses, if you should worship me, but in between we get this aorist participle, peson. Peson, because it's aorist, punctiliar action, if after falling down you should worship me. So he says, here's the deal. I will give you all this great stuff you see if after falling down you should worship me. So it's a very demonstrative act. It's the wording, the phrasing paints a vivid picture of one falling before another and engaging in this worship. Demonstrative worship. Food for thought. Hold on to that idea. We're going to come back to it shortly. Let's take a look at what Jesus says back to him in verse 10, and this is my translation of Matthew 4:10. Then Jesus said to him, "Depart, Satan, for it has been written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you worship or serve." So Satan says, if you fall down before me and worship me, I'll give you all this stuff, proskuneses in the subjunctive. Jesus says, you shall worship the Lord your God. So that's future active indicative, second person singular, you shall worship. The words sound the same phonetically, proskuneses, but the first one, they're spelled differently. The first one is subjunctive, the second one is indicative. And is future indicative. So Jesus' response is, you shall worship the Lord your God. Both coming from proskuneo. Interesting stuff. Let's think about this word for a moment. In classical Greek, proskuneo literally meant to prostrate oneself before another. So if someone was important, if you were in the presence of greatness, of someone important, you would fall to your feet. You would fall to your face, kissing their feet, kissing the hem of their garment. It's a physical manifestation of you positioning yourself lowly in front of one who's perceived to be great. It's of someone important. In Koine, it came to mean falling down as an act of obeisance. It's a physical demonstration of worship. And what does worship mean? Worship means ascribing value or worth to someone or something. And so how does this ascribe value? If you assume this lower posture, if you fall down on your face in the dirt in front of someone, you're elevating them by virtue of the lowness that you've put yourself in. So Jesus says in response to Satan, who says, if you fall down and worship me, I'll give you all this stuff. Jesus says, we fall before no one but God. Okay, so only before your God. But that's not all that he says. Look at the second thing he says. He alludes to Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 13, and says, "And him only shall you worship," or serve. But the word for worship here is not the same word. It's not proskuneo. So let's take a quick look at that in Koine. Kai auto mono, and him only, latruses, shall you worship. Now, latruses comes from latruo, and it means the formal worship at the temple. It's the services conducted by the priesthood, the sacrifices and the sprinkling of blood and the washing and the rituals of that, by extension, that people participated in, bringing your newborn child to be presented at the temple. Any of the services and ceremonies that were described in, say, the first 8 or 9 chapters of Leviticus, all of these ministrations of the plan of salvation that kept the people in atonement with God through sacrifice and prayer and ceremony and feasts and joint meals together with the priests and all these things that happened, that was the part of the latruo. So it's participation in the system that God established to deal with sin and maintain a relationship with his people. So Jesus uses both words. He says, you will only proskuneo, you only fall down before and worship God, and him alone do you participate in this service. But notice, Jesus in both verbs are future indicative verbs. You shall worship. You shall worship in the sense of participating in the service of the plan of salvation through this sacrificial system. So proskuneo is adoration, personal abasement, obeisance. Latruo is accepting and participating in the prescribed system for forgiveness of sin and for atonement. So why are they both there in Matthew 4? The first one, proskuneo, represents perspective of self in relationship to God. That's why Jesus says, we only bow down before God. You shall only proskuneo, you shall only fall on your face before God, because everyone else is a peer. Everyone else is a sinner in need of a savior, just like all the rest of us. Then he says, the second one is participation in that covenant relationship. You won't get all the kingdoms of the world. You won't get back to an Adam and Eve in Eden pre-sin-like condition where you serve as God's vassals over the creation by bowing before Satan. You only get it through atonement, latruo, in the system of atonement, forgiveness, reconciliation, and covenant relationship that God established. So we get two great words, proskuneo, latruo. Both mean worship, but mean worship in a different sense. And it's how Jesus defeats Satan in the third temptation by making it clear to him there's only one worthy of our falling on our face before, and that's the one who, through this magnificent plan of salvation that he's laid out, provides us with the opportunity for atonement and really to sit at his side, overlooking all the kingdoms of the world in their glory, not to be given to us by this deceiver, tempter, and liar. 2 words for worship. Great stuff. If you enjoy that, you know what to do. See you next time.